ado, I happily welcome Liz. Liz, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, and she's going to talk about task activation, switching, and stopping, which is important for all of those with ADHD and particularly for ADHD kids. Okay, Liz.
Let me see if I can share my screen. Thanks for the introduction. This was kind of fun for me to think about and to sort of design my, there we go, to sort of design some slides for this, because I spend, the majority of my time thinking about, writing about, working with, let me just move your faces around here. So how do I not, I don't know what you guys can see, but anyway, what does it look like on your end?
We can see your main slide and then we can see your slides on the side.
I wonder how I make it go away.
Liz, you see at the bottom on the bar, you see all the way to the right where it's right before the slider. Right, more right, more right. Nope.
Yep, that's it.
Nope, that was not it.
That's not it.
Press escape.
That's weird. When I hit escape, nothing happens. Now we're going through the slides. I just can't back up the slides.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, we can just see your toolbar. That's the only thing. I would try pressing like Xing out of it, the red button in the left.
Open it again. Let's see what happens. All right.
So all the way at the, yes, that one.
Okay. Very nice. Thank you for that. Wow. You can tell I do this a lot. What was I saying? Yes. So this was sort of fun for me to think through and put together, because most of the time I am thinking about, writing about, talking about adults and mostly women with ADHD. So as Ellen said, task activation, switching, and stopping for kids and adults with ADHD is a challenge. Let me just jump right in here. So the first thing, and you clearly do not have to understand or even memorize any of this stuff. I just wanted to do a really quick review of executive function. I like this Brown model. I don't know if you've seen it before, but this is my favorite one because it's so visual. And you can just see all of the individual little clusters, as Brown calls them, of executive functions. Because when we're talking about task shifting, when we're talking about activating or starting, and even hyperfocus, we are talking about coordinating generally more than one executive function. I just wanted to show it to you. Again, you don't need to know anything really about this, but I'm going to probably use the words executive function at some point. Okay, so some of the reminders I like to give myself and other parents about some specific challenges that come up when we're talking about activation and task switching and everything. The first thing is, I don't know what this green thing is in the middle of the screen. I don't know why it's there. That's really weird. Can you see the green thing?
We can't see it, no.
Oh, good. If you can't see it, then it's fine. So number one, I always like to joke around about Newton's law. So what is it? An object in motion will stay in motion, especially in a straight line. But an object at rest probably will not move unless some force is applied to it. ADHDers are kind of missing the force sometimes. If you want to be really Star Wars about it, you could say the force is not with us all the time. So just something to think about. Number two is default mode network. Now, you can Google this, seriously. There's lots of information about this, but I think it's particularly important when you're talking about ADHD. You're in default mode network whenever you are sort of, I always say, passively absorbing things. I think I'm in default mode when I'm watching television, even scrolling YouTube videos. Anytime you're daydreaming and you're not doing something that is cognitively demanding, you are not problem solving. This can be really creative sometimes, but transitioning to full engagement, whether that means physically, mentally, whatever, is very, very difficult. And for kids, even more so. Number 3, of task evaluation and planning actions. So funny enough, the research tells us that evaluating a task, basically taking it apart, putting it back together, breaking it down into discrete steps. This is an executive function that does not come online until like most people are 24, 25, or 26. And honestly, there are adults, myself included in that never really get good at task evaluation. And so it's kind of laughable that we toss kids, say, into school and we expect them to start evaluating tasks and executing on them. And then we get frustrated when they can't do it. So I like to point that one out as well. Number 4, thinking about the future and time horizon. So kids often don't think about the future. If I say to my son in the morning, don't forget, we're doing this afternoon, he is not going to remember. I don't think he gets much past lunch, probably most days. So if you say to your child, on Monday, I need you to take out the garbage on Tuesday, it's just unlikely that they're going to remember. They cannot picture more than probably 12 hours ahead in time. Just depends on the age of the child and maybe the brain maturity of your child. But they don't have time horizon. Same thing with schoolwork. If a teacher, we went through this with my son this year when he started 6th grade, the teachers would start something maybe Monday or Tuesday, and they might say, finish this by Friday. My son didn't know, first of all, when Friday was, but he also didn't know that meant it was homework. Like that wasn't discrete enough for him. So this future thing, it's just not happening. In working memory, again, adults have trouble with this, but holding things in mind. To give a school example, if you have math 3rd period at 3:30 or something, if you go to do your math homework, you might not remember the lesson from class. Just holding stuff in mind like that. It's very difficult. Okay, as a rule, and I know this is hard, if you're an adult with a brain-based challenge as well, but as a rule, I like to encourage families to build habits and routines, just general habits and routines. So for small children, this is things like chore charts and whiteboards. My kid loved laminated things he could draw on when he was little. If you're familiar with Melissa and Doug, there was this chore chart that was magnetic. It had these little wooden pieces on it. My son messed around with that chore chart probably when he was 4 until 2nd grade. And he used to be like, do I get an allowance for doing these? And I was like, where did you even learn what an allowance was? But anything visual, usually for smaller kids, to get them into a flow, habits and routines. I put predictable before and after school routines, but actually routines, predictability in general works. For example, my son knows what time he needs to be at the bus stop, and he knows I'm not going to be happy if I have to drive him into school. He also knows in general that after school, there's a certain routine, whether he has jujitsu that night or maybe a music thing, whatever he has going on, he knows the flow after school, and he knows that dinner is almost always at 6:30. There is some predictability. We can work within that, but he knows in general what we're doing at what time, at least during the week. With older kids, and I started this year again with my son, he also knows that as a routine, I will try to body double with him in the afternoon when he gets home from school, because homework in particular is really tough for kids. It's like this, oh, I already left school. Now I'm at home. I'm in a different context. My brain needs a break. I don't want to do it. I can't just tell him to go to his room and do his homework. It's not going to work. So I will stay in the same area with him. I will try to wrap up my stuff for the day. I know that's not always possible, but body doubling or knowing predictably that you don't have to tackle these things alone can be really helpful. In order to build any kinds of habits and routines, you do probably need some environmental cues. Whole thing with ADHD is it's really hard to hold stuff in our mind. So a lot of this stuff has to happen externally and environmentally. Timers, clocks. I know it's annoying. I know it's annoying, but timers and clocks are really helpful. Supplies at point of performance. One of the funny things with kids and homework, at least this kid, is that he will say things to me like, "Oh, I didn't bring that home. I can't do it. I didn't bring it home." Or like the book that they're reading or something. I didn't bring it home. Or I don't have graph paper to do my math. So guess what? We have graph paper in our house, and we have colored pencils, and we have everything he needs to do school stuff. So he can't tell me he doesn't have it. Unfortunately, verbal reminders, even though they're annoying for you and annoying for the child, there's a lot of verbal reminders going on. Don't forget, you have jujitsu tonight. Don't forget, the bus is, I don't know, whatever. Like, I just give him a lot of verbal reminders, and I still use a lot of Post-its even now. I have a giant orange Post-it in the bathroom for him that says, I think it says, dry off before deodorant on it. Because deodorant doesn't work really well if you're dripping wet when you put it on. So he knows he has to put the deodorant on after he takes a shower, but the drying part, he still needs a lot of reminders. All right, the other general rule is to be super, super specific. Clean your room is probably not going to work. I don't even know if that would work with a 15 or 16, like, probably not. You have to be really specific with kids. Gather your dirty laundry, put away your clean laundry. You may even have to say, the shorts and the pants go here and the underwear goes here. You may have to be that specific, or it will just all go in a pile. If you're lucky, it'll go in one drawer. It might just be a pile though on the floor. Put your toys and your books on the shelves. Be very specific. The other thing I like to do, especially if it's like a clean your room sort of deal, I will tell him before he does anything else to fill a trash bag with stuff you don't want, stuff that you want to donate, or stuff that is broken. Kids do that thing where they just hold on to stuff that's broken or that they don't even like, or I don't know why they do that. But usually that's a good way to get started. Here's a trash bag. But just be specific. Because if you just say, do a thing, it's probably too ambiguous. All right, so I think this is what you actually came for. All right, so task activation or task initiation, the perennial struggle of kind of everybody with ADHD. Okay, so my favorite way to talk about getting started, doing the thing, is to talk about Goldilocks, because everyone knows Goldilocks and her little creepy home invader thing, how she went into the bear's house and tried to sit on their chairs and eat their food. And I think she even got in their beds. The whole thing is a little bit weird. But basically, too hot, too cold, not quite right. With ADHD, we often have a lot of conditions to doing things. And I did not make this up all on my own. This comes from the work of Dr. Russell Ramsey from University of Pennsylvania. It's actually mentioned in his newest book. The thing about these conditions is that they are internal and external, and the balance between the two is very delicate. And I would say that with ADHD, sometimes, even if all the external conditions are great, if the internal conditions are not, it is much harder to get started on things. So external conditions are things like environmental distractions, televisions, phones, whatever your kid gets distracted by. I have actually had my child get distracted by the dog. So even that kind of stuff can be a problem. My kid's been on the floor with the dog when the teacher's talking. It's just not. Again, with the supplies, having supplies at the point of performance is probably a condition, especially if we're talking about anything homework related, and location. So with kids, a lot of times there is this thing in their mind, right? School is school. You do the school stuff at school, and then you come home. And that set shifting to home can be really disruptive, especially if your child looks at school as school and home as home, and never the two shall meet. And that happens a lot. Like, I went through that this year when we started 6th grade. He was really kind of angry that he had to do school outside of school. So just, getting used to that, that's a huge shift for kids when they start having to do homework. And sensory things, funny smells, the temperature in the room, lighting. Kids are in fluorescent lighting most of the day. That can really charge them up. So, when they get home, just being mindful that some of those conditions might be factoring in. Internal conditions are things like ambiguity. This happens a lot. Like, that's why I said to be specific. It's going to be very, very hard for you to start, for your child to start on something if you're not actually sure what the first step is, what the outcome will be, what the steps are to do it. Remember what I said about evaluating a task? Yeah, a lot of ambiguity can cause problems. Tolerating discomfort. It is, when I say discomfort, I mean, it could be if you're telling a kid to take out the trash or whatever, or you're finding old nasty food under their bed. Okay, that's discomfort. But I'm actually thinking more about emotional discomfort. The idea of starting something when you don't want to start something and the energy needed to do that, or a non-preferred task like math homework. I mean, that's not comfortable, psychologically speaking. Being hungry or thirsty, that's a thing. I can't write if I'm hungry or my water bottle isn't near me. I can't do that. And also, and this is a little bit hard to assess with kids, but internal dialogue and mood. In order to do something, to start, the mood has to be right. The energy has to be right. You have to know what you're doing. And if that's not there, I actually had a ninth grader when I was teaching once say to me, I can think my way out of anything. And I was like, I know what you mean, man. But yeah, like getting your head straight just to do something. All right. So strategies for this Goldilocks thing. First thing is try to identify some of your child's conditions. This is when you have to sort of play the parent coach. Just questions to consider. What would you rather be doing right now? Really, what would you rather be doing? What makes this feel hard? Sometimes that what makes it hard question, you can get some information from that. Is there anything that would make it easier? Or how can I help? What's the first step? If you don't know what that first step is, that's when we have to figure it out. How would you know when you're done? Is it important? And if it's not, why not? Are there consequences to not doing it? Do you just need a snack or a drink? And is there any reward to doing it? Can you name any reward to doing this thing? All right, so more stuff on getting started. Remember I said about evaluating the task. If you're getting the sense that whatever the thing is, the task is, if you're getting the sense that your child's unclear on it, help them evaluate the task. They're going to need help with it. Try to come up with the first step. A lot of times, if you can come up with the first step, like that's the icebreaker sort of, and then plan it out together. Break it down. Think of different ways to approach it. Do that together so they don't feel like they're alone in it, and also so they feel clear on it. Make it time bound. Most of the time, we're talking about a non-preferred task. So I would say, depending on the age, really short periods of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I used to tell my son in elementary school, we had these math flashcards, and he thought they were so annoying. But it really only took like a minute to do all of them. He just didn't want to do it. So I would say, all right, let's just see how many we do in 2 minutes. And he finished them all. So keep it really, really short and check in. If it's something that's more of a project, check in 5 minutes. Engaging energy is so important because we always forget that ADHD isn't just about task management or attention management. Like, it's actually an energy thing too, because we all have a finite amount of energy, kids included. So try to gauge energy when you check in. All right. Make it interesting or funny. So depending on the age of your child, I recently had and I actually wrote an email about this, a really poorly designed, I guess it was like a project, homework assignment, take home, I don't know what it was. And they had taught our kids a whole bunch of discrete concepts about weather, about how storms form and precipitation and all this stuff. And then they said, okay, apply this to the Amazon rainforest. Now, a bunch of 11 and 12-year-olds were like nobody understood the assignment. And my son was getting a little like tense. I was getting a little tense. I didn't understand the assignment. And so all of a sudden it occurred to me that he had had this whole thing in his mind a week or so prior, telling me about the Amazon rainforest and all the carbon dioxide from the, and so I said to him, I said, how does the carbon dioxide get to the rainforest? How does it do that whole thing that you told me about? So I had to really like push to make it relevant to him. Also, I gamify a lot of things, or I make a bet, or I challenge him. Like he'll be telling me what he's doing, and I'll say, I can use, because he'll be looking all the school documents, and I'll say, I can find that on Google. And he's like, no, you can't. Oh, watch me. And I'll be like, I bet I can find it. And for some reason, he does not want me to beat him. Like he wants to find the information before me. I also will, he always tells me I'm not funny, but then he's like smiling when he says it, but I'm always telling him like stupid jokes, or I'm asking the digital assistant for the joke of the day or something. I'm always just trying to make him laugh, because humor goes a long way when you're doing something that you don't want to do. Do something else first. I have been known, if my kid is really, really struggling, I have been known to say, like, let's walk the dog, or why don't you take out the garbage? Or do you want to watch a couple funny animal videos or something? I have been known to let him do something like take a little brain break first. Usually if he starts laughing or he's having a good time and I approach it again, circle back again, we can get it started at least. All right, I'm going to switch tasks now, and we're going to go to task switching. All right, so pivoting from one task to another. So we all do this a lot, probably more than we should. The thing about task shifting and pivoting is that it's a transition. There are transitions all day long that we don't even notice. Leave the house, go to school, go from school to home. I don't know about you, but I can't leave the house without coming in and out the door probably 2 or 3 times, just things I'm forgetting. It's because it's a transition. With ADHD, transitions are very, very sensitive. They require both energy and coordination of all those executive functions from the beginning. The other thing about transitions is that energy and executive function are both finite resources, meaning, we all have a finite amount of energy and we all have sort of a finite amount of executive function every day, ADHD or not. And so this is just tough. And we're talking about kids with developing brains here. So I like to think about transitions as like a 3-step process. So the first thing is you have to break the spell, stop, disengage. Some people like to use big words like inhibition. I don't go for that. I like to say break the spell. So stopping, interrupting, whatever. There's lots of ways to do this. And I'm going to talk about annoying my kid in the hyperfocus section a little bit. The second part is the actual pivot, the sort of perceptual shift usually involves something physical, like moving your eyes or moving your body, moving your attention from one thing to the other. This is like the hardest, this actual shift in the middle here. The problem is your brain, and kids do it too, your brain is doing this like less than second calculation of energy and mood. Like, do I want to do this? Can I do this? Am I in the right mood? How much energy, how much physical energy, how much mental energy? Your brain's doing this like calculation, and it's a real sticking point. And it happens, like I said, it happens in under a second. And then you have to re-engage. So remember what I said about activating, right? So you have to re-engage. You have to have the energy to get the ball rolling on something new. And you have to manage your sort of self-talk around that, which kids don't always have a lot of access to helpful self-talk. Heck, adults don't have access to a lot of helpful self-talk. Like I said, I think of this as a 3-step process because I think in threes. there is a visual that Dr. Marcy Caldwell, who's going to be in Princeton in a couple weeks, her Instagram account is called Adept, but I put the link here. She has a graphic. I believe hers, I don't think it has 3 steps. I feel like the way she thinks about it has like 4 steps, maybe. I can't remember, but it's another cool way to visualize the transition of like a task shift. All right, so this is how you will see this in action. Difficulty leaving a task they're already engaged with and presumably making progress on. There is nothing worse than, tapping on your kid's shoulder when they're trying to get to the next level of the Spider-Man game or whatever. Yeah, that's really tough when you feel like you're making progress and you don't know when you're going to be able to come back. Switching from a preferred task to a non-preferred task. Almost everything we're asking kids to do is non-preferred, I feel like, as parents. I feel like. Starting all over again, reactivating, putting all that energy into starting over again. Okay. So I don't have a lot of great ideas for task switching, but the first thing I put on here was avoiding multitasking. Like I said, we're all multitasking all the time, and it doesn't work for anyone, let alone children and adults with ADHD. So I would, to the best of our ability, I would avoid the multitasking and eliminate distractions, meaning if you're trying to do some homework, if you're trying to do, a chore or something around the house, I would try very hard not to have the phone present in the pocket or like whatever at the same time. Because for these days, I feel like that's the most likely sticking point, is the phones. By the way, my kid does not have a phone yet. Choose one task to work on at a time. I call this monotasking. And again, I know it's easier said than done, but our kids are digital natives. So they often have, especially if it's a school issued computer or whatever, multiple tabs and things open. And I'm always telling him, no, if you're doing this presentation you got to make for social studies, just keep that open. Stop toggling between your email and like this and that. And no, like just go over here. I know that they do that sort of intuitively, but I don't know. I try to keep him from doing it if I can. And I set time parameters. If I know he's got a whole bunch of stuff and we're getting ready to go to jujitsu and I need him to do something else tonight, I will tell him 20 minutes, just do this thing for 20 minutes. That's it. I give lots of cues before we switch tasks. Just this afternoon, my son had finished his homework for whatever reason in one of those flex periods. And so he got on the computer and I said, wait, I was like, we're going to leave here in 30 minutes for jujitsu. And he's like, I know. And so I waited 10 minutes and then I said, we're going to leave here in 20 minutes. So I was giving him lots of cues that we were transitioning back out of the house and he needed to change his clothes. And he did. He actually did. When I told him we were leaving in 10 minutes, he got up. I don't know how he did it, but he just got up and he walked away and he went to change. And I did ask him about it. I asked him, why me just prompting him why that worked today. And he told me that he figured out that he can't play games before jujitsu. He's like, I can go to YouTube and watch. He has a friend with a private YouTube channel. And he said, I can watch that, but I can't play my games because then I'll get stuck. And I was like, okay, all right. So lots of cues in advance of a shift, especially a shift out of the house or a shift to the next big activity. Lots of cues. I also, one of my things with kids with brain-based challenges, and I used to try to talk to parents about this when I was teaching, plan less. I know that, I don't know, I feel like parenting is a competitive sport or something, like everyone's enrolling their kids in 2 or 3 different sports and maybe some music and some art program and like extra language lessons and all this stuff. So the more stuff you have planned, even outside of school, that means the more task shifting and scheduling and blocked out your days and weeks are. I actually think that's not always the best thing for every kid. So try not to overplan. yeah, I mean, my son does one sport and he plays one instrument. So we have those two activities. He has one other little league, like gaming league thing he does, but that's not frequent. So I try to keep our calendar consistent and like not overscheduled. The other thing is I like to acknowledge that, we're sending our kids to school, talk about multitasking. We're sending our kids to school where the expectations are high, especially in a public school environment. There is overhead lighting all day long. They're switching classes. They are having to pay attention. As my son always says, I do what they ask me to do. I don't throw food in the cafeteria. I do what the teachers ask me to do. I don't shout in class. We are asking them to regulate themselves for like 8 hours a day in this semi-chaotic environment sometimes in school. And I just like to acknowledge that like they've worked really hard. So then when they come home and we're like, I need you to do this and this and this, and we have a whole checklist of things we want them to do, it can be a lot sometimes for kids. And I think it's way more important to connect with your child to understand their experience than to like, I don't know, check more things off your list. All right, last thing, stopping hyperfocus. And I call it the brain suction cup. I have opinions about hyperfocus. I've heard people on the internet talk about it being a superpower or a gift or whatever. In my experience, it is not really. It might feel really good. It might feel like you're in some kind of flow state when you're in it. But a lot of times, first of all, when you're that involved in something, you're kind of excluding other people and things you care about. And also it's very fear-based. If I stop, I'm going to lose momentum. I'm going to forget where I stopped. I'm going to create all these open loops. And people with ADHD, children too, have this thing with not finishing. A lot of times we've been told we don't finish things, or we're unreliable, or maybe we're called selfish or whatever. I just think that when we're in that state, it's like a fear thing where I can't stop, or I'm never going to finish it. So that's just my opinion. I do not think it is a superpower. Okay, so a couple things about hyperfocus. Everything has a completion point. Everything, even the next level of a video game, even a project for school. I don't know if I mentioned this. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier or not. One of the things that I've noticed, especially with middle school this year, is there's more group projects. And sometimes if there's a group project, you got 3 or 4 kids and everybody has a role, but you might not be clear on your role. And nobody knows what their job is and what the project's going to look like. And maybe you didn't see any examples. And I don't know, getting some kind of clarity around when it's done or when it's good enough can be really helpful. Sometimes if you don't know what done is, just figure out what halfway is before you go to the teacher or something and ask. I've worked with a couple college age students, and I noticed that sometimes when we're maybe a little perfectionistic, we tend to add complexity or detail to things, to the requirements. Don't do that unless you're like a professor or someone specifically tells your child to add more. Don't add more sources or whatever. Don't add things. Figure out a timeline. Is there a hard stop? Sometimes, believe it or not, if you have a hard stop, it is easier than if it's just wide open. I have a friend who has a senior, and all year long, he's supposed to work toward this senior project, and they should not have started it early in the year. They didn't even start talking about it really until February. And so now there's this crunch between February and like May for him to do this. And I just think they should not have done that. They almost shouldn't have introduced the project until January, because now everyone's just in a tiz and it's a mess. Even the parents are upset. The other thing about hyperfocus is, and I do this a lot with my kid, when I start to hear him going, where he's like the keyboard and he's making these sounds and stuff, I'll be like, oh, how's your head? Does your head hurt? You seem a little frustrated. What's going on? And I'll ask him if he wants to take a break. He always tells me no, but he also admits that a lot of times if he walks away and comes back, the answer is much more obvious. It just took us a while to get there, but check in. You can tell when someone's really hyper focused and they're not hearing you when you say their name, they're not looking at you. Like, you have to get in there and sort of get in their face about it a little bit. Okay, breaking the spell. I mentioned this during the transitions screen too. So I do all manner of obnoxious things to get my son to stop doing stuff. I have done really mellow things like say, hey, do you want to look at this coding camp? Or can you feed the dog for me? Like, I've done that, but I also tend to do things like play 80s music or Taylor Swift, because he does not like Taylor Swift, and I will just dance around and I will sing. And then sometimes he will say to me, okay, just if you stop, I'll do it. Like, okay, he cannot stand it, but I will just annoy him harmlessly, but I will get on his nerves until he's paying attention to me to get him to stop. I do this a lot. He would probably tell you. But yeah, figure out ways that you can just playfully sort of break the spell. The other thing I started to notice, and I was just talking to someone about this recently, is if your child takes any kind of medications and they are in the middle of something as it is wearing off, you will notice this strange, they won't even notice, they won't see it happening. You will see it happening, where it's like all of a sudden they're really intense. And it tends to be the meds. And I don't know if it's the brain going, ooh, change, shift in the dopamine through the synapse. Like, I don't know what it is, but there is a definite tendency to whatever you're on, when that medication starts to wear off, it's like there's this doubling down or something that happens. So notice that if it's happening at a certain time of day, it might be medication related. Also, pay attention to the context and activity. I kind of know at this point, and even my kid is starting to figure out, what are the things that he gets stuck on, that once he starts, he cannot stop. Start to notice those things. And I mean, as my kid knows, he really just shouldn't play a game. No Spider-Man. Like, there's a couple games he plays. Spider-Man, even he and his friends are into, what is it? Modding, Roblox, I think it's called. He knows that if he has stuff to do, he cannot even do that. He cannot do Roblox. He cannot play Spider-Man because the rest of the night won't happen and it will go badly. So just an awareness of what the things are that get you and or your child stuck. Okay, I think I did them all. Hopefully I'm not talking so fast. I was really worried about the time. What time is it? Are we good on time? Okay, not bad.
I think we're terrific.
Now I can go back through if people, because people probably need to see things. Oops, not that. Okay.
That's cute.
With the dog. Yeah.
So Liz, I just want to say that while you were going through your screen, I tried to get onto Marcy's Instagram and I couldn't for some reason. So what I did is I put in the chat another way to see this blog about task switching. So if people want to check the chat and the link that Liz provided doesn't work for you, didn't work for me. It could be because the zeros and is it a zero? Is it okay. So anyway, so here's another way to see her. Her blog.
I like hers. Hers is a little, like I said, it's a little bit different from mine, but I like the way she conceptualizes task shifting. So it's a good one.
And she's got these images there that
Mm-hmm.
go. So I had a couple of, I guess I had, maybe we should see if anybody else has questions. I don't want to make this just a
Do you
conversation.
want them in the, do you want them in the chat or do you want us to field them hands raised? What's comfortable for you?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter to me at all. I just need to move over here so I can see people. There we go. Okay.
Anybody have a question or a comment?
I do.
Go.
Hi. Perfect example for tonight. I was going not insane, perfect word to explain, crazy looking for my child's sketchbook. He likes to draw in his book and everything. I ended up finally turning, it finally end up finally finding it underneath his bed. Is there any advice you could give me, not to go crazy for an item or something that my son enjoys?
Well, you were looking for it.
Yes,
How old is your?
he's 12.
Well, my my advice would be he should look for it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I know. We were both, I was help both. I told him to, he started putting things back in his place, you know, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that situation, if
Mhm.
the idea, if you were trying to, so you were trying to find the notebook, were you also just trying to organize the space a little bit? Is that what you were?
No, we were just looking for the notebook, his like little sketchbook.
Well, what I probably would have done is, and it's funny you say this. My son does this to me sometimes where he'll say, I can't find something.
Mhm.
Like, I can't, and I don't know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how hard he looks. Sometimes I swear he goes in his room and spins around and comes back out. So I probably, a lot of times what I do is I'll be like, okay, and he knows I'm not happy, but I will get up and I will walk back to the room and I'll be like, is the light on? The light's not even on in here. Click, click.
Right.
I'll turn on the light and then I'll be
Mhm.
like, okay, I will start over here. You start over there. We'll see who finds it first.
Right.
Usually I find it because I guess I'm better at the searching, but
Right.
I would definitely make it a team thing.
A team thing. Okay.
I would do.
Yeah, no, I mean, we found it eventually. He was in the shower and then I found it. So I was like, oh, look, I found your book. And I'm like, you have to put it back in the place that you had it for next time. Because in a way, it was kind of like driving me crazy. Once I find something and I got ADHD, I can't stop looking. So it was like that dopamine in me, like
Mhm.
I'm going until I find that thing. So it was tiring. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, you probably put a lot of energy into it
Yeah, I did.
for that period. Yeah. For that period of time.
Really did. But that's all I wanted to ask.
Yeah. Thanks for the question.
No problem.
Oh. Sorry, I'm missing stuff.
So I have to say, I can, but Patricia, I can relate to you and I can relate to your son. I have this memory of my mother saying to me when I couldn't find something, look under your bed.
Mhm.
And she was often right, even though I hated the fact that she was right about it. That's where things sometimes landed. So I love, Liz, what you said about, we want to empower and encourage kids to do things on their own as opposed to us doing something for them. At the same time, I can relate to the whole idea of, okay, now where is it? All right, let me see if I can find it. It then becomes a challenge. It's sort of, it becomes, yeah, a challenge, a novelty, however you want to describe it, and a little hyper focused. So
Yeah.
I will always tell him, I will help you. I will assist, but I need you to, pull your weight here, especially with something like that. And he does do that to me. Like I said, he'll say, I can't find this thing or whatever. I can't find my gi for jujitsu. And I'm like, you can't find your gi. What do you, but yeah, that's like, okay, well, we'll do it together. But he has to sort of, I don't know, do his part. Or I'll say that to him. You're a big kid. I will assist, but I'm not just doing it for you.
Because I just want to bring up that I think it's so important as parents to recognize when we're enabling and when we're supporting, and to know that difference, that one is teaching the skill so that eventually they can do it on their own.
I try. I always tell him it's about the effort. Like, I just want to see you put effort in. Same thing with school. Like we've had some really wonky, especially science assignments come home this year where I don't even understand the assignment. I'm 44 years old. I do not understand the assignment. And like I will tell him, and we've had assignments that we did not get full credit for, that we've gotten like C's, like in the 70s or maybe in the 80s for. And the funny thing is they'll let you keep doing it. Like they'll let your kid keep adding information and getting more points. And I have told him at least twice that I can think of, nope, we're done with this. But all I care about is you making an effort and not blowing off the assignment completely. We're done with this. And he's always like, you can just tell he's so relieved that I'm not going to push it. And I'm just like, nope, you put the effort in. I watched you do it. You spent 2 hours on that assignment. We are not redoing it, not even for more points. So.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
I have one question. When you suggested asking your child, is this important to you? What if their answer is straight up just no? And that's where they get stuck.
I don't think there's anything wrong, actually. Well, okay. So I have actually had that this year with a couple of things, because I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but up until about middle school, there isn't really homework in school. And all of a sudden we just drop them in middle school and it's like, oh, you have to plan ahead and you have to know the schedule and you have to know when your test is and you're just supposed to do it. And you're supposed to have a locker and you're supposed to take stuff in and out of it's wild, I think. And my son earlier this year went through, I don't know how long it lasted, a little phase where he was very angry that all of a sudden school wasn't over at the end of the day, that he had to do some homework and stuff. And, like he would say, what is the point of this? And the one day I actually said to him, I was like, I agree with you. Like when I was a teacher, one of the things they required when we did our planning was to put homework in. And we had to have it in the planning. And, all the educational research is that it does not reinforce skills, really. I've never seen any research that said that it helps kids get better at algebra or whatever. So I admitted to my son this year that sometimes homework is nonsense. I was like, it's not. And I think he got it. Well, I know he got it. But I said to him, the homework isn't about the homework. Like, it's not actually about these 4 math problems or whatever. I said, the whole point of homework is to train you how to prioritize, how to do things that, and I said things that suck before you go and you do your fun stuff. And I said, it does suck. I said, I do things that I don't want to do every day because I'm an adult and I have to, and this is practice. And that's what I told him. I said, so I agree with you. It's stupid. Like it's like, it's a dumb, and it's not important to you. But then we started talking about it some more, and he actually admitted to me that the homework, that particular homework, was just basically a gimme for points. Like, as long as you do the homework, you get points. And I was like, okay, well then look at it as a gimme. And so that's a long-winded response to say, I would actually appreciate the honesty. First of all, no, this isn't important to me. I hate it. Thank you for being honest with me. And I'm really trying to empathize with your point of view. This is the purpose of this. So what is like a place we can meet in the middle, or meet your teacher in the middle, or whatever it is. Does that make any sense? Or am I just like babbling because it's this time of night?
It did. And yes, I agree with you. The honesty is nice for sure. And sometimes my daughter is willing to still complete what's required, to your point of saying, all right, let's just get it done. We agree it's stupid and let's get it done. And then there's other days where we're firmly entrenched in, I just won't do it. And sometimes we have to let that go and say, okay. And other times we're try a lot of your other suggestions to unstick ourselves.
Yeah. And I mean, I haven't had to deal with it much the last, say, marking period, but there were a couple times that he just there were late assignments that he could have turned in for a few extra points, and it did lower his, his average just for the marking period. And he was a little miffed or something about it. And I remember saying, well, that's the natural consequence of not turning in those silly vocabulary boxes. Now you know what the consequence is. It's up to you. I'm honest with my kid also about some of I'm going to say the grade stuff, because I think sometimes in school they'll say silly things to kids like, if you don't, I don't know, you won't get into a good school, or you won't do this and blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's a good way to frame school and learning, making it like a threat. Like, if you don't do this, bad things are going to happen. I just think, and that's fine. If your daughter is just like entrenched in the no, I'm not going to do it, then I would just be like, okay, well, as long as you understand whatever the consequence of that is, and maybe it's a very small one, maybe it's a big one, but as long as you understand the consequence of it, that's fine. And I know it's hard, like as a parent, to swallow it and be like, but sometimes they have to experience that. My friend's child just failed math for the marking period. And they told him if he failed like this 4th marking period, that he has to do the summer school online thing for math. And he actually said to his mother, well, he's like, that would be embarrassing. He's like, I'm not going to do that. So I'm not going to fail. Like, no way. So, and he does have ADHD. Yeah. So,
Liz, I'm just thinking, could you maybe say a word or two about how it might look different in adults?
which part?
I'm sorry, the task switching, the transition.
Well, so most of the women I work with, like what I notice is, depending on their situation, with adults, it tends to help to have sort of signposts in your day. Like, this is the time I eat breakfast. This is the time I go into work, or I start work, if you work at home or whatever your thing is. This is the time, like I have a client who does school drop off and pick up for a couple of kids in her neighborhood. That is a signpost in her day. Once she drops off those kids, she goes home and she starts her stuff for the day. What I notice is when you don't have these sort of signposts in the day, especially adults, you don't know when you're going to be in like work mode and when you're going to be in rest mode. There's this sort of wide open spaces, which is like the kiss of death for ADHD. What's that? What's that funny rule? Like, there's something that says like the task will expand to fill the time you have to do it. I forget what it's called, but for adults, what I notice the most is, I don't want to say default mode, but I notice like not being able to get started. We will stay in the pre-activation phase for like 8 hours of the day. And then all of a sudden at 4 p.m, it's like, oh. And then we've generated enough panic to start doing something at 4 p.m. So that's how I see it most of the time, as an activation thing. And I actually asked Dr. Brown about that. About people who work for themselves or work at home and have trouble with structure in the day. And he said he considers it an activation problem, like not being able to structure your time. So I don't know if I'm even answering your question. I feel like my meds, talk about meds wearing off. I feel like my meds have worn off.
Well, let's see if we have any other questions. Chime in.
I have a question. So Liz, what would some solutions or possibilities be for an activation problem like that throughout the day for adults?
Well, with most of my clients, the first thing we try to do is create those signposts in the day. So ideally, what time would you like to get your day started? And what could we structure around that? Like, if you have children and you're trying to get them to school, or if you have a job that expects you to go in a couple of days a week or something, what time? Like, what time are we aiming for? How much time do we need? And that sort of, I don't know which slide number it is, probably at the very beginning, having these sort of like predictable flow to our day. That's usually the first thing I do, is I'm kind of like, okay, what time do you usually roll out of bed? What time do you want to get started? How much time do you think you need to do the things you want to do? Is your to-do list on a day-to-day basis even realistic? Because I hear a lot of that too. People have these sort of, I actually had a couple clients with binders. They call them like their home binders or something. Binders just full of to-do lists. And I was like, oh God, like that's a lot. Can we narrow the field for the day? I did a whole presentation once. I think I called it The Good Kind of Lazy. I did it for the conference a couple of years ago. And it was all about narrowing the field for yourself every day to like maybe 3 or 4 items instead of 10 or 15 or 20 that you can never realistically do. It's a lot easier to structure with 3 or 4 important tasks a day. It's a lot easier to prioritize and to structure your time if you narrow the field for yourself. And that's how I usually spend my time with adult clients, is giving them loose structure and signposts and figuring out how to prioritize in a way that works.
Very helpful. Thank you.
I have a question about morning routine. So I wake up my son in the morning. He's usually the first one I wake up. He's the one with ADHD. And I have to stand in front of his door for him to actually move and do things. Otherwise, if I walk away, it just doesn't happen. Is there another way of doing that without having, like, I call it the war zone, you know, when it starts like, it's like too stressful and everybody's on edge and it just, and then my other kids get involved and it just like cycles out of control, like the fighting and the bickering and all that kind of stuff. So to avoid it, I stand there and I just kind of help him move along. But I also have to make lunch. I have to do, you know, help them, the rest of the group also get out. So I can't, it just takes up too much. I don't know if you have any suggestions in that case.
Well, I don't know your whole situation. There's a couple things that would pop into my head. So your child, I forget what they call that, the way sometimes people with ADHD, myself included, we will have trouble falling asleep. But once we are asleep, they call it the sleep of the dead, where it is really hard to get them awake and alert and sort of moving. So that might be part of what is going on. I don't know if there's a name for that, where once we're asleep, we're like really asleep. I don't know. So that might literally be like a physiological, neurological thing where he is having trouble getting his brain going in the morning. But what for practical purposes, like for you, what I would try to figure out is what you can do the night before so that in the morning you have less things to do. I heard you say you have other children. So that's still, yes, you have to pay attention to your other children, but I would try to figure out what things you could do the night before so that you're less under pressure. I heard you say lunches and maybe some other things.
Yeah, we do as much prepping the day before. We call it the backpack checklist, and they all have to do as part of like their after school routine. So they come home and everyone knows what's kind of expected of them that evening. But no, it's mainly like him getting out of bed and getting dressed. Like that's really all it is. And so he'll take out a book, he'll start to read, he'll lazy out in bed, he just drag on and on. And so, like, for example, there are a couple mornings, he's very musical. So a couple mornings he does like choir or concert band and he has to wake up early. The whole house is getting ready for him because nobody else is in choir or band. But he'll just drag his feet to get out. The funny thing is though, he is the early bird in the house. Like everybody else will be in bed on the weekend and he's the first one up. And the same, you know, he's usually the first one. He just can't seem to, I don't know, get the engine started or something. I don't know, unless I'm standing there and then he knows I'm watching. So he kind of forces himself to do it. I don't know if it's an ADHD thing or it's just him being, you know, lazy. I don't know, because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes since I don't have ADHD. I don't really know what's going on. But I don't want to call it lazy because I know that's also something that is like a label that sticks. So yeah, I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, it doesn't actually sound, you're right. I know where your head goes, like, yeah, that's like a natural place for your head to go. But you're right, we avoid the L word around here. But what it sounds like to me is, especially if he sort of pops out of bed on the weekends when there isn't, I'm going to say some outside, like some responsibility or something he has to do. It's interesting that he can pop out of bed a little easier. Like it would be a good place to like sit, and I know this is like time consuming and not something everybody would want to do, but I would seriously want to like sit with him and be like, so what's going on in the morning? How do you feel when you get out of bed? Do you dread the day? Do you look forward to the day? Is there anything that like makes you uncomfortable about it? Or do you literally feel so tired and like maybe I don't know if he takes any medication or anything, but maybe like neurologically, he really needs something to like get it going in the morning, and like medication as soon as he rolls out of bed, a glass of water, medication, I don't know, but that would be like, I would really spend time trying to understand where his mind was in the morning, even if it's totally foggy and he can't carry on a conversation. I would be trying to figure that out, because it could be neurological, it could be psychological, it could be mood related. Like I'd be curious in the summer, if there's no school, no place he has to be at a specific time necessarily, I'd be curious how he was getting up in the morning, because maybe, I don't know, that could be a discomfort, like a psychological discomfort for him. I don't know.
Yeah, he gets up pretty easily in the mornings on the weekends to play. So he loves to play. But
Yeah.
during the week, he doesn't have that. So it's
It's like
probably
he has
a
to
little
go
bit
and
drag.
he has to go and do something where he has to exert a little mental energy. And maybe he's having a very hard time with that. Just one thing is like, it's not a choice. I will say that. It's definitely not something he's choosing. Doesn't sound to me.
Liz, I just want to thank you also because you have really shared your own personal stories. And I think so many times that it hits home for us all, and you were really vulnerable. And I appreciate that so much. So thank you.
Oh, well, thanks. I was worried that because I only have one child. I was worried that I only had one
You should have
kid to
gotten
talk
another
about.
one just for the night.
Well, I'm too old for all that now.
Well, I want to second Andrea's gratitude for your just being so real. It makes it very relatable, and it's not like you're teaching out of a book. You're living the experience, and you're talking to us based on your experience, and clearly because you work with others, their experience as well. So thank you so much. I see it's time, and I suppose if anybody has any additional questions, you would encourage them to write to you or reach out to you in
Yeah.
some way.
If you're whoopsie.
What happened?
There we go. If you're I always tell people you can send me, oh, here we go with the weird. Okay. Yeah, I always tell people when I do a bunch of book discussions for ADA and stuff. And I always tell people, this is how you can email me, send me questions, whatever. I do actually respond to email. I'm pretty good about that. You may have to wait 24 hours, but I'm pretty good. I'm not inbox zero, but I'm pretty good at responding to people. Yeah, you can send me hate mail. You can send me whatever you need there. My website, okay, I'm working on the website right now. You can still read everything I've written for 6 years, even stuff I'm embarrassed about. You can still read all that stuff on there. But if you're actually trying to get a hold of me, I would just email me. And I'm on social media. I'm just not good at social media, but you can find me there.
And you have a tremendous amount of strength. So let's appreciate and applaud that. And Liz,
Yes.
thank you. Your slides are fabulous as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks. I like to give specifics. I don't like to be too general with people. So
And they weren't overwhelming. So, I love that about them too. And some nice visuals. So I'm going to thank everyone for coming. We really appreciate, and we hope you learned a lot. I certainly did. And we hope to see you at one of our support groups, or maybe at the conference that's going to be on April 15th, or at our speaker next month, which is May 1st. So, call, write, if there's anything you want to hear about, please write to me at adhd.bergencounty@gmail.com, or I think you can write through the website. I'm not sure. If there's a topic that you want to hear about, we'll find somebody. So have a good night, and thanks again. And Liz,
Thanks,
Thank you.
Liz.
thanks.
Thank
Nice
you.
seeing everybody.
That's great.
Very much.
Yeah.
Hey, Ray, welcome back.
Press record so it stops recording.